Laughter signals death, and the sound echoes across burning cities as green-skinned monsters celebrate the destruction of everything you've ever known. The guttural roar of their engines mingles with screams of terror, while massive war machines reduce entire districts to rubble and flame. My name is Elena Corvus, former Hab Block supervisor on the agri-world of Tertius Prime, until the Ork WAAAGH descended upon our peaceful planet like a plague of mechanized nightmares. You think that makes me a survivor, but you don't know what I witnessed in the processing camps where they sorted us like livestock. Their crude laughter still haunts my dreams, accompanied by the metallic taste of fear and the stench of burning promethium. This is my testimony of humanity's darkest hour, when civilization crumbles beneath alien savagery, and ordinary citizens face horrors that defy comprehension. Told by someone who learned that sometimes survival requires becoming something you never imagined possible. Chapter 1. When the sky burns. The first sign of the Ork invasion wasn't the roar of their crude spacecraft, or the thunder of explosive ordnance. It was the silence that preceded the storm, when the vox-networks suddenly went quiet and the orbital traffic control stations stopped responding to routine commercial inquiries. I was completing my monthly productivity reports in the administrative complex of Hab District Gamma when Junior Supervisor Marcos burst through my office door, his face pale with terror and his uniform torn from running through crowds of panicked civilians who'd begun gathering in the streets outside. "Elena, you need to see the emergency broadcasts," he gasped, clutching a portable Vox unit that crackled with static and fragmented transmissions from the Planetary Defense Forces. Something's happening in the outer system. The Navy patrol ships have gone silent, and there are reports of massive energy signatures moving toward the inner planets. His voice carried the edge of hysteria that I'd learned to recognize during my 15 years of civilian administration, when crisis management became as important as resource allocation for maintaining order among the 3 million inhabitants of our agricultural world. The Vox broadcasts painted a picture of systematic destruction that began at the system's edge and moved inexorably toward our planet's orbital space, with each defensive position falling silent after brief bursts of desperate communication that described enemies beyond anything in Imperial tactical manuals. The attackers weren't the familiar threats of pirate raiders or chaos cultists that occasionally troubled our sector. They were something alien and savage that approached warfare as entertainment rather than strategic objective. Tertius Prime had been selected for agricultural development precisely because of its isolation from major shipping routes and military importance, making it an unlikely target for serious enemy attention while providing optimal conditions for food production that fed 17 different worlds throughout the subsector. Our defensive capabilities were minimal, consisting primarily of a small Planetary Defense Force garrison and orbital monitoring stations that were designed to detect smuggling operations rather than repel organized invasion by hostile alien forces. The first visual contact with the invading fleet came through the orbital observation platforms that normally tracked weather patterns and shipping traffic, their sensors revealing a massive collection of crude spacecraft that defied every principle of Imperial engineering and aesthetic design. The vessels appeared to have been assembled from scavenged components and random debris, held together by welding that looked more like artistic expression than functional construction. However, their sheer number and obvious military purpose made their primitive appearance more terrifying than reassuring. Governor Thaddeus Kane attempted to maintain civil order through carefully worded announcements that downplayed the threat while requesting citizens to remain calm and follow evacuation procedures that had never been seriously tested during our planet's peaceful history. His measured tone and bureaucratic language couldn't disguise the underlying panic that was spreading through every level of planetary administration as the scope of the approaching catastrophe became undeniable. Citizens of Tertius Prime, we are experiencing temporary disruption of orbital communications due to solar storm activity, Governor Kane announced through the Planetary Broadcast Network, though his words were contradicted by the obvious military preparations visible throughout every major population center. As a precautionary measure, all civilians are advised to report to designated emergency shelters until normal communications can be restored. This is a routine safety protocol that ensures proper coordination during periods of atmospheric interference. The evacuation orders created chaos rather than security, as 3 million civilians attempted to follow procedures designed for natural disasters rather than military invasion. The emergency shelters were overcrowded within hours, while transportation networks collapsed under the strain of moving entire populations to defensive positions that had never been intended for long-term occupation. The breakdown of civil infrastructure began before the first enemy soldier set foot on our planet's surface. My own evacuation from Hab District Gamma required crossing 17 kilometers of countryside that was rapidly filling with refugees, carrying whatever possessions they could transport while fleeing toward the fortified complexes surrounding the planetary capital. The roads were clogged with civilian vehicles, cargo haulers, and improvised transports that created massive traffic jams extending for dozens of kilometers in every direction. The sight was simultaneously pathetic and terrifying, representing the collapse of organized society in the face of threats that exceeded our capacity to comprehend or resist. The first orbital bombardment began during the third day of evacuation, when crude kinetic projectiles started falling from orbit with devastating effect on transportation infrastructure and communication networks. The impacts weren't precisely targeted like Imperial munitions, but their random nature made them more psychologically terrifying than accurate fire would have been. Each explosion created massive craters while sending shockwaves that could be felt dozens of kilometers away, accompanied by clouds of debris that rained down on fleeing civilians. The psychological impact of witnessing orbital bombardment was profound and immediate, transforming abstract knowledge of our vulnerability into visceral understanding that nowhere on the planet would be safe from enemies who commanded orbital space. The random nature of the attacks meant that survival became purely a matter of chance, eliminating any illusion that careful planning or quick thinking could provide protection against enemies whose technology could reach any point on the planet's surface. Junior Supervisor. Marcos was killed during the first bombardment when a kinetic projectile struck the convoy ahead of our refugee column, vaporizing 14 vehicles and everyone inside them while creating a crater that blocked the road for hours. His death was random and meaningless, neither heroic nor particularly tragic, simply the elimination of another human life by forces too distant and alien for personal hatred or understanding. The arbitrary nature of his destruction became a recurring theme during the invasion, as millions of deaths occurred without purpose or significance beyond the alien entertainment of our attackers. The refugee camps established around the planetary capital were overcrowded and undersupplied, with emergency services designed for temporary crisis management, attempting to support populations displaced from across the entire continent. Food distribution was sporadic, medical care was limited to the most critical cases, and sanitation facilities were completely inadequate for the numbers involved. The breakdown of basic services began weakening civilian resistance even before the first ground assault commenced. The Planetary Defense Force attempted to maintain order while preparing defensive positions around critical infrastructure, but their numbers were insufficient for protecting both military objectives and civilian populations distributed across hundreds of emergency shelters. The choice between military effectiveness and humanitarian protection became increasingly difficult as enemy forces approached the planet's surface with obvious intention to engage both combatants and non-combatants without discrimination. Colonel Marcus Ironhand, commander of the PDF garrison, made the decision to concentrate his forces around the planetary capital while abandoning outlying settlements to their fate. His assessment was militarily sound, but morally devastating, condemning millions of civilians to face alien invasion without protection, while focusing limited defensive resources on positions that might delay, rather than prevent inevitable defeat. "We cannot protect everyone," Colonel Ironhand announced during his final briefing to civilian administrators. "Our duty is to preserve what we can while making the enemy pay the maximum cost for their conquest. Civilian casualties are regrettable, but unavoidable, given the disparity in forces and the obvious nature of our opponents. Prayer to the God Emperor and faith in imperial justice must provide the courage that our weapons cannot supply." The first ground landings occurred simultaneously across every continent, with crude drop pods and improvised landing craft delivering thousands of alien warriors whose appearance exceeded every nightmare that Imperial propaganda had created about hostile Xenos species. The creatures were massive humanoids with green skin, brutal features, and obvious relish for violence that made them appear more like demons than conventional military opponents. Their weapons were crude but effective, while their vehicles seemed designed more for intimidation than tactical efficiency. The sound that accompanied their arrival was unlike anything in human experience, a combination of mechanical noise, alien vocalizations, and explosive destruction that created an audio environment of pure terror. The crude laughter that echoed from their forces carried implications of entertainment and sadistic pleasure that transformed military conquest into a form of recreational violence designed to maximize suffering rather than achieve strategic objectives. Chapter 2: Green Tide Rising. The initial ground assault defied every principle of military strategy that Imperial tactical doctrine had established for analyzing enemy operations, with Ork forces advancing in massive disorganized waves that relied on overwhelming numerical superiority and crude enthusiasm rather than coordinated tactical planning. Their approach to warfare appeared recreational rather than strategic, treating the conquest of our world as an entertaining diversion rather than a serious military objective that required careful planning and resource allocation. The alien warriors themselves were terrifying beyond anything depicted in Imperial educational materials about Xenos threats, standing nearly 3 meters tall with muscular frames that seemed designed for violence and crude features that radiated malevolent intelligence. Their green skin was marked with ritual scarification and primitive tattoos that indicated tribal affiliation within their savage society, while their weapons appeared to be improvised constructions that prioritized intimidation over precision or efficiency. The vehicles that supported their ground assault were equally crude and terrifying, resembling mobile scrapyards rather than conventional military equipment while generating noise levels that could be heard dozens of kilometers away. The psychological impact of their mechanical cacophony was immediate and profound, creating audio terror that preceded the arrival of their forces by hours, while eliminating any possibility of surprise or concealment for defending forces or civilian populations. My first direct encounter with Ork forces occurred during the evacuation of Emergency Shelter Sigma 7, where approximately 4,000 refugees had been sheltering in converted industrial facilities that provided minimal protection against orbital bombardment, while offering no defense against ground assault. The aliens arrived without warning, their crude vehicles bursting through the perimeter defenses like they were children's toys, while filling the air with explosive destruction and alien war cries. The slaughter that followed was systematic but chaotic, with Ork warriors selecting victims apparently at random while demonstrating obvious pleasure in the terror and suffering they created. Their weapons were brutal and imprecise, designed to maximize damage and pain rather than provide clean kills, while their behavior suggested that causing fear was as important as eliminating resistance. The systematic nature of their violence indicated deliberate policy rather than undisciplined bloodlust. The capture procedures employed by Ork forces revealed planning and organization that contradicted their primitive appearance, with specialized units separating civilian populations according to criteria that weren't immediately obvious, but suggested sophisticated understanding of human society and productive capacity. Young adults were separated from children and elderly citizens, while individuals with technical skills or administrative experience received different treatment than manual laborers or agricultural workers. The processing camps established by the invading forces combined elements of industrial facility and primitive ritual space, featuring crude but effective infrastructure for managing thousands of human prisoners while providing accommodation for Ork overseers whose behavior ranged from casual violence to apparent scientific curiosity about human physiology and psychology. The camps were designed for long-term operation rather than temporary detention, suggesting strategic planning that extended beyond simple conquest and destruction. The alien overseers demonstrated intelligence that exceeded Imperial estimates of Ork cognitive capacity, with some individuals displaying technical knowledge and organizational skills that enabled effective management of complex logistical operations. Their crude appearance and primitive technology concealed sophisticated understanding of engineering principles and resource management that allowed them to construct functional facilities from scavenged materials and improvised components. The work assignments given to human prisoners reflected careful analysis of individual capabilities and potential utility for various Ork industrial operations, with technical specialists directed toward weapon maintenance and vehicle repair, while physically capable individuals were assigned to construction projects and resource extraction. The systematic nature of this classification process indicated intelligence gathering and planning that contradicted propaganda descriptions of Ork society as purely chaotic and undisciplined. The psychological warfare employed by our captors was deliberately calculated to break human resistance through systematic humiliation and random violence that made survival dependent on complete submission to alien authority. Public executions were conducted for entertainment as much as discipline, with victims selected to maximize terror among surviving prisoners while demonstrating the absolute power that Ork forces wielded over human life and death. The crude medical experiments performed by some Ork specialists revealed scientific curiosity about human physiology that was both fascinating and horrifying, involving procedures that seemed designed to understand biological differences between human and Ork anatomy, rather than simply torture victims for recreational purposes. The research was primitive but systematic, suggesting genuine scientific interest, despite the obvious cruelty and disregard for human suffering that characterized the methodology. Food distribution within the camps was irregular and deliberately inadequate, providing just enough nutrition to maintain work capacity while creating constant hunger that weakened psychological resistance and encouraged competition among prisoners for scarce resources. The rationing system was designed to prevent effective organization of resistance activities while maintaining sufficient prisoner health for productive labor. The communication networks established by Ork forces demonstrated technical sophistication that exceeded their primitive appearance, with long-range communications equipment that maintained contact with other invasion forces while coordinating logistical support and strategic planning across continental distances. Their crude technology was more effective than it appeared, suggesting deliberate design choices rather than simple technological limitations. The entertainment activities enjoyed by Ork overseers included organized combat between human prisoners, crude sporting events that involved lethal obstacles, and elaborate practical jokes that resulted in serious injury or death for the victims. These activities seemed to serve social functions within Ork culture, while providing regular opportunities for demonstrating power over human captives through recreational violence. The industrial facilities constructed by Ork engineers transformed captured civilian infrastructure into weapons production centers and vehicle manufacturing plants that supplied their expanding military operations with ammunition and equipment. The conversion process was crude but effective, demonstrating practical engineering knowledge that enabled rapid adaptation of human technology to alien military requirements. The tribal dynamics within Ork society became apparent through observation of their internal hierarchy and decision-making processes, with leadership based on physical dominance and demonstrated effectiveness in violence rather than formal rank structure or administrative authority. The constant competition and occasional violence between different Ork groups created opportunities for human prisoners to exploit factional conflicts while avoiding attention from more dangerous overseers. The systematic destruction of imperial symbols and religious artifacts revealed deliberate policy rather than random vandalism, with Ork forces specifically targeting churches, administrative buildings, and monuments that represented imperial authority or cultural identity. The destruction was thorough and methodical, suggesting understanding of psychological warfare and the importance of eliminating symbols that might inspire human resistance. The crude artwork and graffiti created by Ork forces transformed captured human settlements into alien landscapes that reflected their savage aesthetic and territorial marking behaviors. The visual transformation was psychologically devastating for human observers, eliminating familiar landmarks and cultural references while creating environments that reinforced alien dominance over human civilization. Chapter 3, Blood and Iron. The expansion of Ork control across our planet's surface followed patterns that combined strategic planning with recreational violence, as alien forces systematically eliminated organized resistance while establishing permanent infrastructure for long-term occupation and resource exploitation. Their approach to conquest differed fundamentally from imperial military doctrine, treating warfare as entertainment rather than purely strategic objective, while demonstrating sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social organization that contradicted their primitive appearance. The destruction of planetary communications networks was conducted with precision that suggested technical expertise despite the crude tools employed by Ork engineering units, who systematically identified and eliminated critical infrastructure while preserving selected facilities that could be adapted for their own military requirements. The selective nature of their destruction indicated detailed intelligence about planetary systems and strategic priorities that exceeded what random violence could have achieved. The fate of Governor Kane and the planetary command staff became clear when their severed heads were displayed on crude spikes outside the former administrative complex. Though the elaborate ritual scarification and alien symbols carved into their skulls suggested that their deaths had served ceremonial purposes beyond simple elimination of resistance leadership. The desecration of their remains was calculated to terrorize surviving civilians while demonstrating Ork dominance through symbolic victory over Imperial authority. The transportation infrastructure was modified rather than destroyed, with Ork engineers converting civilian cargo systems into military logistics networks that supported their expanding operations while demonstrating impressive technical knowledge despite their primitive tools and crude methodology. The efficiency of these modifications suggested that Ork intelligence had studied human engineering principles before implementing conquest operations, enabling rapid adaptation of captured technology to alien requirements. The medical facilities established in the processing camps revealed disturbing interest in human biology that went beyond simple prisoner management, with crude but systematic research into pain tolerance, reproductive capacity, and psychological breaking points that suggested long-term planning for human exploitation rather than immediate extermination. The research methods were barbaric but scientifically oriented, indicating genuine intellectual curiosity despite the obvious cruelty and disregard for human suffering. My assignment to the weapon maintenance facility provided intimate knowledge of Ork technology and engineering principles that were far more sophisticated than their crude appearance suggested, with weapons that combined scavenged Imperial components with alien innovations to create hybrid systems that exceeded the performance of either technology individually. The improvised nature of their equipment concealed deliberate design choices that maximized effectiveness while remaining compatible with their resource-limited manufacturing capabilities. The daily routine within the camps was structured around work assignments that served both productive and psychological functions, keeping prisoners occupied with essential tasks while preventing the idle time that might enable resistance planning or psychological recovery from their traumatic circumstances. The work was deliberately exhausting, designed to maintain productivity while eliminating the energy necessary for organized rebellion or escape attempts. The Ork overseers demonstrated individual personalities and preferences that contradicted Imperial propaganda about alien uniformity, with some showing curiosity about human culture, while others displayed pure sadistic enjoyment of human suffering. The variety of their behavioral patterns suggested complex social structures within their species that enabled different individuals to specialize in various aspects of prisoner management and industrial operations. The entertainment events organized for Ork enjoyment included elaborate gladiatorial contests between human prisoners, construction of deadly obstacle courses, and complex betting systems that demonstrated mathematical sophistication despite their primitive cultural context. These activities served social functions within Ork society while providing regular opportunities for demonstrating their power over human life through recreational violence that reinforced their dominant position. The resource extraction operations implemented by Ork engineers revealed detailed knowledge of planetary geology and mineral deposits that suggested comprehensive survey work conducted before the invasion, enabling immediate exploitation of valuable resources while establishing permanent infrastructure for long-term occupation. The efficiency of their operations indicated strategic planning that extended far beyond simple conquest and destruction of human civilization. The communication intercepts gathered by hidden resistance cells revealed that our planet was only one target in a massive campaign involving dozens of worlds throughout the sector, with Ork forces coordinating operations across interstellar distances while maintaining supply lines and reinforcement schedules that demonstrated impressive logistical capabilities. The scope of their invasion challenged fundamental assumptions about Ork military capacity and strategic planning abilities. The religious practices observed among Ork forces involved crude but elaborate rituals that seemed designed to honor successful violence while reinforcing social hierarchies through ceremonial display of combat prowess and leadership dominance. The spiritual dimensions of their culture provided insight into motivational factors that sustained their military campaigns, while creating internal competition that drove individual warriors to escalating levels of violent achievement. The industrial accidents that occasionally occurred in their manufacturing facilities revealed safety standards that were completely indifferent to worker casualties, with human prisoners treated as expendable resources rather than valuable assets worthy of protection. The casualty rates in dangerous operations approached 50%, creating constant turnover that required regular replacement of skilled workers while maintaining production schedules through sheer numerical superiority. The psychological conditioning applied to long-term prisoners involved systematic destruction of individual identity and social connections, while encouraging survival behaviors that prioritize collaboration with alien authorities over loyalty to fellow humans. The techniques were crude but effective, gradually transforming proud Imperial citizens into cooperative tools who served alien interests while maintaining minimal resistance to their oppression. The escape attempts organized by desperate prisoners were invariably detected and punished through public executions that served both disciplinary and entertainment functions for Ork overseers, who seemed to enjoy the challenge of preventing human resistance as much as they appreciated the opportunities for recreational violence that failed escape attempts provided. The brutal suppression of resistance efforts eliminated hope while reinforcing alien dominance through systematic terror. The crude medical treatment provided to injured prisoners was sufficient to maintain work capacity while remaining deliberately painful and humiliating, demonstrating technical knowledge of human physiology combined with deliberate cruelty that served psychological warfare objectives. The medical procedures were effective but traumatic, creating additional suffering while preserving the productive capability necessary for continued exploitation. The seasonal changes that affected camp operations revealed long-term planning that anticipated extended occupation of our planet, with infrastructure modifications designed to accommodate varying weather conditions while maintaining productivity throughout annual cycles. The preparation for permanent settlement indicated strategic objectives that extended beyond temporary military conquest toward establishment of permanent alien colonies supported by human slave labor. The technological innovations developed by Ork engineers through combination of human and alien knowledge created hybrid systems that exceeded the capabilities of either technology individually, suggesting genuine scientific curiosity and experimental methodology, despite their primitive tools and crude aesthetic preferences. The innovation process was chaotic but productive, generating effective solutions through trial and error methodology that occasionally produced breakthrough advances. Chapter 4: The Great Devouring. The systematic exploitation of human resources reached industrial efficiency levels that revealed the true scope of Ork strategic planning, as alien administrators implemented comprehensive extraction programs designed to maximize productive output while maintaining sustainable population levels for long-term labor requirements. The organization of these operations contradicted every assumption about Ork cognitive limitations and planning capacity, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of resource management and economic principles that enabled effective governance of conquered territories. The classification system used to categorize human prisoners evolved into complex hierarchies that reflected detailed analysis of individual capabilities, psychological profiles, and potential utility for various specialized functions within the expanding Ork industrial complex. The assessment procedures were crude but thorough, involving physical testing, skill evaluation, and psychological observation that enabled optimal assignment of human resources to appropriate productive activities while identifying potential security risks and resistance leaders. The breeding programs initiated by Ork authorities revealed long-term demographic planning that anticipated generational management of human populations as renewable resources rather than expendable assets, with systematic selection of reproductive pairs based on genetic characteristics and productive capacity. The programs were implemented with clinical efficiency despite their obvious moral horror, demonstrating scientific understanding of human biology combined with complete indifference to individual human dignity or emotional bonds. The educational systems established for human children born in captivity involved systematic indoctrination designed to create generations of humans who accepted alien authority as natural and legitimate while retaining sufficient technical knowledge to serve productive functions within Ork society. The curriculum was carefully designed to eliminate imperial cultural identity while developing skills that would enhance their value as specialized workers and technical specialists. The technological integration projects that combined human engineering knowledge with Ork innovation created hybrid systems that exceeded the capabilities of either species individually, demonstrating genuine collaborative potential despite the coercive nature of the relationship. The research was conducted through systematic experimentation that treated human expertise as valuable intellectual property, worthy of careful cultivation rather than simple exploitation. The administrative bureaucracy developed by Ork authorities to manage conquered territories included complex record-keeping systems, resource allocation protocols, and productivity measurement standards that rivaled imperial administrative efficiency while remaining compatible with alien cultural preferences and decision-making processes. The bureaucratic structures were crude but effective, enabling systematic governance of millions of human subjects while maintaining order and productive capacity. The cultural assimilation policies implemented by Ork overseers involved gradual replacement of human social customs with hybrid practices that incorporated elements of both species' traditions while reinforcing alien dominance through systematic modification of religious beliefs, family structures, and community organization. The assimilation process was subtle and comprehensive, designed to eliminate resistance through cultural transformation rather than simple suppression. The resistance networks that emerged among human prisoners were systematically infiltrated and eliminated through sophisticated intelligence operations that demonstrated detailed understanding of human psychology and social organization, with Ork agents employing manipulation techniques that exploited natural human tendencies toward hope and solidarity to identify and neutralize potential threats to alien authority. The scientific research conducted by Ork specialists included comprehensive studies of human cognitive capacity, emotional responses, and behavioral patterns that enabled development of more effective control mechanisms, while satisfying genuine intellectual curiosity about the psychological differences between human and Ork mental processes. The research was primitive but systematic, generating useful knowledge despite the brutal methodology and obvious disregard for human welfare. The economic systems established by Ork administrators created sustainable exploitation models that balanced productive output with population maintenance while generating surplus resources that supported expanding military operations and colonial infrastructure. The economic planning was sophisticated despite its crude implementation, demonstrating understanding of complex resource relationships and long-term sustainability requirements. The judicial systems implemented to maintain order among human populations involved crude but effective legal frameworks that balanced alien authority with sufficient predictability to enable human psychological adaptation to their circumstances. The legal principles were arbitrary but consistent, creating behavioral expectations that enabled social stability while reinforcing alien dominance through systematic application of rewards and punishments. The recreational activities permitted for human prisoners were carefully regulated to provide sufficient psychological relief to maintain productivity while preventing the social bonding and cultural expression that might enable organized resistance. The entertainment was deliberately individualistic, designed to prevent collective identity formation while satisfying basic human social needs through controlled interactions. The medical research programs conducted by Ork scientists involved systematic experimentation designed to understand human physiological limitations, disease resistance, and genetic variation that could inform optimization of human productivity while satisfying scientific curiosity about biological differences between species. The research was conducted with complete disregard for human suffering, treating subjects as laboratory animals rather than sentient beings worthy of ethical consideration. The infrastructure development projects implemented by Ork engineers transformed captured human cities into alien landscapes that reflected their aesthetic preferences while maintaining functional efficiency for administrative and industrial operations. The transformation was comprehensive and irreversible, eliminating familiar human environments while creating alien spaces that reinforced psychological adaptation to new social realities. The communication networks established by Ork authorities enabled effective coordination of operations across planetary distances while providing propaganda channels that reinforced alien authority through systematic information control and psychological manipulation. The communication systems were crude but effective, maintaining operational security while influencing human psychological adaptation to their conquered status. The transportation systems modified by Ork engineers created efficient logistics networks that supported industrial operations while restricting human movement to prevent escape attempts and resistance organization. The transportation infrastructure was carefully controlled, enabling productive activity while maintaining security through systematic movement restrictions and surveillance protocols. The housing facilities constructed for human workers provided minimal comfort while maximizing population density and surveillance opportunities, creating living conditions that reinforced alien authority through systematic elimination of privacy and individual autonomy. The housing was functional but deliberately dehumanizing, designed to break psychological resistance while maintaining sufficient health standards to preserve productive capacity. The food production systems established by Ork administrators achieved sustainable nutrition levels while maintaining deliberate scarcity that prevented human psychological independence and encouraged competitive behavior among prisoners. The food distribution was adequate but systematically inadequate, creating constant hunger that weakened resistance while maintaining work capacity through careful nutritional management. Chapter 5. Machinery of Oppression. The industrial complexes that emerged from the systematic conversion of human infrastructure represented the apex of Ork technological achievement, combining their crude engineering aesthetics with human technical knowledge to create hybrid manufacturing systems that exceeded the productive capacity of either species operating independently. The transformation was comprehensive and irreversible, replacing familiar human landscapes with alien environments that served both practical and psychological functions in maintaining Ork dominance over conquered territories. The labor management systems implemented by Ork overseers achieved maximum productive efficiency through systematic application of behavioral psychology principles that exploited human social instincts while preventing the formation of resistance networks or cultural solidarity that might challenge alien authority. The management techniques were crude but effective, combining physical coercion with psychological manipulation to create compliant workforces that maintained high productivity levels despite their oppressive circumstances. The quality control procedures established in Ork manufacturing facilities demonstrated sophisticated understanding of engineering principles despite their primitive tools and crude aesthetic preferences, with inspection protocols that ensured functional effectiveness while remaining compatible with alien cultural values regarding appropriate technology design. The quality standards were pragmatic rather than elegant, prioritizing battlefield effectiveness over aesthetic appeal or manufacturing precision. The research and development programs initiated by Ork technical specialists involved systematic experimentation with human technology and engineering principles, creating hybrid innovations that incorporated the best elements of both species' technological approaches while remaining compatible with Ork resource limitations and manufacturing capabilities. The innovation process was chaotic but productive, generating breakthrough advances through trial and error methodology that occasionally achieved remarkable results. The logistics coordination required to maintain industrial operations across multiple facilities revealed sophisticated planning capabilities that contradicted assumptions about Ork cognitive limitations, with supply chain management that efficiently distributed resources, while coordinating production schedules across complex networks of interdependent manufacturing centers. The logistical planning was crude but effective, achieving operational objectives despite primitive communication systems and informal organizational structures. The environmental modification projects undertaken by Ork engineers involved systematic terraforming of conquered territories to create conditions more suitable for alien habitation, while maintaining sufficient human-compatible environments to preserve the productive capacity of enslaved populations. The environmental changes were extensive and permanent, reflecting long-term commitment to colonial settlement rather than temporary military occupation. The psychological conditioning programs applied to human workers involve systematic destruction of individual identity and cultural memory, while implanting behavioral patterns that supported alien objectives through automatic responses that bypassed conscious resistance. The conditioning was crude but comprehensive, achieving behavioral modification through repetitive indoctrination combined with carefully administered rewards and punishments that reinforced desired behavioral patterns. The surveillance systems established by Ork security forces created comprehensive monitoring networks that tracked individual human activity while identifying potential security threats through systematic observation of behavioral patterns and social interactions. The surveillance was primitive but pervasive, maintaining security through omnipresent observation that eliminated privacy while deterring resistance activities through constant awareness of alien oversight. The communication intercepts gathered by hidden resistance networks revealed that similar conquest operations were being conducted simultaneously across dozens of worlds throughout the sector, with coordinated timing that suggested strategic planning on galactic scales, rather than opportunistic raiding by primitive warrior tribes. The scope of Ork military coordination challenged fundamental assumptions about their organizational capacity and strategic sophistication. The technological innovations emerging from human-Ork collaboration included hybrid weapon systems that combined Imperial engineering precision with alien innovation to create armaments that exceeded the effectiveness of either technology operating independently. The collaborative process was coercive but productive, generating genuine technical advances despite the obvious exploitation and suffering that characterized the research environment. The economic analysis conducted by surviving human administrators revealed that Ork resource extraction and industrial production had achieved sustainability levels that could support indefinite colonial occupation while generating surplus capacity for military expansion into adjacent territories. The economic planning was sophisticated despite its crude implementation, demonstrating understanding of complex resource relationships and long-term growth requirements. The cultural transformation taking place among long-term human prisoners involved gradual adoption of Ork social customs and behavioral patterns as survival strategies, while maintaining minimal resistance to psychological assimilation that threatened fundamental human identity and values. The cultural adaptation was systematic and apparently irreversible, creating hybrid human-Ork social dynamics that served alien objectives while preserving sufficient human characteristics to maintain productive capacity. The religious practices emerging among desperate human populations involved syncretic combinations of imperial doctrine with alien spiritual elements that reflected psychological adaptation to their conquered circumstances, while maintaining minimal connection to traditional human cultural identity. The religious adaptation was spontaneous but systematic, creating belief systems that provided psychological comfort while reinforcing acceptance of alien authority as divinely ordained. The architectural modifications implemented by Ork construction teams transformed human cities into alien environments that reflected their aesthetic preferences while serving practical functions for industrial operations and population control. The architectural changes were comprehensive and permanent, eliminating familiar human landmarks while creating alien spaces that reinforce psychological adaptation to new social realities under foreign occupation. The medical treatment facilities established by Ork authorities provided minimal healthcare services designed to maintain human productive capacity while conducting systematic research into human physiology and disease resistance that served both practical and scientific objectives. The medical care was adequate but deliberately impersonal, treating human patients as valuable livestock rather than individuals worthy of compassionate treatment. The educational institutions created for human children involved comprehensive indoctrination programs designed to eliminate imperial cultural identity while developing technical skills that enhance their value as specialized workers within Ork industrial operations. The education was effective but traumatic, creating generations of humans who accepted alien authority as natural while retaining sufficient human characteristics to serve specialized functions, requiring cognitive capabilities that exceeded Ork mental capacity. The transportation networks established by Ork engineers enabled efficient movement of personnel and resources while restricting human mobility through systematic checkpoint controls and movement restrictions that prevented escape attempts and resistance organization. The transportation systems were functional but heavily monitored, serving industrial requirements while maintaining security through controlled access and constant surveillance. The waste management systems implemented by Ork environmental engineers achieved efficient resource recycling while eliminating environmental contamination that could threaten long-term habitability of conquered territories. The waste management was crude but effective, demonstrating understanding of ecological principles despite primitive technology and informal organizational structures. The entertainment facilities constructed for Ork personnel provided recreational opportunities that reinforced their cultural values while serving social functions that maintained unit cohesion and military effectiveness during extended occupation duties. The entertainment was violent but organized, reflecting alien aesthetic preferences while satisfying psychological needs that sustained their military operations. The intelligence networks developed by Ork security forces achieved comprehensive penetration of human resistance activities while maintaining operational security that prevented counterintelligence operations by surviving Imperial loyalists. The intelligence operations were crude but effective, achieving security objectives through systematic infiltration and informant networks that exploited human survival instincts and social vulnerabilities. Chapter 6. Broken Spirits. The psychological transformation experienced by long-term human prisoners represented the most devastating aspect of Ork conquest. A systematic dehumanization gradually destroyed individual identity and cultural memory while creating hollow survivors who retained human appearance while operating according to alien behavioral parameters. The process was subtle and comprehensive, achieving psychological conquest that exceeded the effectiveness of physical coercion or direct violence in eliminating resistance and maintaining long-term control over enslaved populations. The adaptation strategies developed by surviving humans involved careful balance between maintaining essential psychological integrity while demonstrating sufficient compliance to avoid attention from Ork overseers, whose unpredictable violence made survival dependent on appearing completely submissive while secretly preserving minimal human dignity. The psychological strategies were desperate but sophisticated, enabling some individuals to retain sanity while operating within systems designed to eliminate human consciousness and replace it with mechanical obedience. The communication networks that emerged among human prisoners utilized subtle signals and coded messages that enabled coordination of minor resistance activities while avoiding detection by Ork surveillance systems that monitored obvious forms of communication. The resistance communication was primitive but effective, maintaining human social connections through carefully disguised interactions that preserved community bonds while avoiding the systematic retaliation that discovered resistance activities inevitably provoked. The religious practices that developed among desperate human populations involved syncretic combinations of imperial doctrine with survival psychology that provided emotional comfort while maintaining minimal connection to traditional human values and cultural identity. The religious adaptation was spontaneous and varied, creating diverse belief systems that enabled psychological survival while accommodating the brutal realities of daily existence under alien oppression. The family structures that emerged among human prisoners reflected systematic destruction of traditional kinship bonds, while creating alternative social organizations based on survival necessity rather than emotional connection or cultural tradition. The social adaptation was painful but necessary, enabling collective survival through mutual support while accepting the loss of intimate relationships that alien authorities systematically prevented or destroyed. The work specialization that developed within human labor forces created informal hierarchies based on technical expertise and survival skills, rather than traditional social status or imperial administrative rank. The professional adaptation was pragmatic and effective, enabling some humans to achieve relative security through valuable specialized knowledge while maintaining dignity through competent performance of essential functions. The educational systems that emerged among human children involved clandestine transmission of basic imperial cultural knowledge, while maintaining compliance with alien indoctrination programs that sought to eliminate human identity and replace it with hybrid consciousness that served Ork objectives. The educational resistance was dangerous but essential, preserving minimal cultural continuity while avoiding detection that would result in severe punishment for both teachers and students. The medical knowledge that developed among human populations included traditional imperial healing practices adapted to resource-limited environments while incorporating alien medical techniques that proved effective for treating injuries and diseases common in prison camp conditions. The medical adaptation was necessary and practical, enabling survival through improved healthcare while maintaining human medical traditions despite systematic elimination of professional medical resources. The artistic expression that survived among human prisoners involved subtle forms of cultural creation that maintained aesthetic traditions while avoiding detection by Ork authorities who systematically destroyed obvious examples of human cultural activity. The artistic resistance was small but significant, preserving human creative capacity through carefully concealed expressions that maintained cultural identity while avoiding systematic suppression. The technological knowledge that developed through forced collaboration with Ork engineers included understanding of alien engineering principles while preserving human technical expertise that proved valuable for both survival and potential resistance activities. The technological learning was coercive but educational, creating hybrid knowledge that enhanced human capabilities while providing insight into alien weaknesses that might eventually prove exploitable. The economic systems that emerged within human communities involved informal resource sharing and mutual support networks that operated within the constraints imposed by alien authorities while maintaining minimal economic autonomy through carefully concealed trading activities. The economic adaptation was necessary and sophisticated, enabling survival through collective resource management while maintaining social cohesion through mutual assistance. The leadership structures that developed among human prisoners reflected natural social hierarchies based on demonstrated competence and moral authority rather than formal imperial rank or administrative position. The leadership was informal but effective, enabling community organization and collective decision-making while maintaining security through careful selection of trustworthy individuals who commanded genuine respect. The psychological counseling that occurred among human survivors involved informal therapeutic relationships that provided emotional support while maintaining sanity through shared understanding of traumatic experiences and collective validation of human dignity despite systematic dehumanization. The therapeutic activities were spontaneous but essential, enabling psychological survival through mutual support and shared resistance to alien psychological conditioning. The escape planning that occupied some human prisoners involved systematic intelligence gathering and resource accumulation while maintaining operational security that prevented detection by Ork authorities whose retaliation against discovered escape attempts was swift and brutal. The escape planning was dangerous but psychologically necessary, providing hope and purpose while maintaining active resistance to complete psychological capitulation. The cultural preservation activities conducted by dedicated human individuals involved memorization and secret transmission of imperial history, literature, and religious traditions, while maintaining compliance with alien authorities who systematically attempted to eliminate human cultural knowledge and replace it with alien propaganda. The cultural resistance was heroic and essential, preserving human intellectual heritage through individual sacrifice and collective commitment to maintaining cultural continuity. The resistance coordination that developed among geographically separated human communities utilized sophisticated communication networks and resource sharing agreements that enabled collective action while maintaining security against Ork counterintelligence operations that sought to identify and eliminate organized resistance activities. The resistance coordination was careful and effective, achieving limited but significant results through patient planning and disciplined execution. The intelligence-gathering activities conducted by human resistance networks included systematic observation of Ork operations and weaknesses, while accumulating information that might prove valuable for future resistance activities or eventual liberation efforts by Imperial forces. The intelligence work was dangerous but essential, maintaining strategic awareness while preparing for opportunities that might enable effective resistance or escape. The sabotage operations undertaken by desperate human prisoners involved careful targeting of alien infrastructure and operations while maintaining operational security that prevented systematic retaliation against human populations. The sabotage was limited but psychologically important, demonstrating continued resistance while achieving minor but significant disruption of alien activities. The psychological warfare conducted by human resistance involved subtle activities designed to undermine Ork morale and operational effectiveness while maintaining security against retaliation that Discovery would inevitably provoke. The psychological operations were small but creative, achieving limited but meaningful results through careful exploitation of alien cultural characteristics and operational vulnerabilities.